Welcome to 60 Skills. The topic of today's discussion is, how much sleep do I need? Sleep is one of these interesting things that directly impacts human health in a way that most people don't really understand. The simple fact of the matter is, at a basic metabolic level, when you're asleep, your body essentially cleans out a lot of quote-unquote junk in your system. This is particularly true of waste products in the brain. It's not exactly clear why this is the case, but it is how it seems to work for most people. Now, the vast majority of people need between 7 and 8 hours of regular sleep a night in order to have peak or optimum performance. There are some exceptions to this, and I will get to that in a moment. When most people routinely get less than 7 hours of sleep a night, their performance degrades. And this is usually quite noticeable to anybody paying attention, but oddly, not often very noticeable to the person who's actually doing the work. You see, as human beings, we're not very good observers of our own behavior, so when we're sick, irritable, or otherwise not functioning well, we're usually not very cognizant of this fact. Sleep, on the other hand, or a lack of it, has huge impacts upon blood markers, the endocrine system, and health writ large, and these effects compound very quickly. If a person receives less than 6 hours of sleep per night on average for any significant length of time, they tend to suffer quite a great deal. Alright, what does this mean in terms of my magical practice? Well, as I mentioned earlier, there are a couple of exceptions to this. One of which is apparently genetic. There is a small group of people out there, usually on the order of about 1 in 1,000, that function perfectly well off of about 4 hours of sleep per night. The recent U.S. President Donald Trump happens to be one of these. It is also one of the telltale signs of a successful general or flag officer in the U.S. military. Many studies have been made on these men over the years, and what they found is they all have exactly one thing in common. They can function for very long periods of time off of very little sleep, and this allows them to do more. That said, this appears to be a genetic level event. Also, what is not said is people who have these genetic markers that allow them to function perfectly well off of very little sleep don't tend to live nearly as long as the general population does. Apparently, despite the fact that this doesn't impact their cognitive functioning or personal energy levels much, it does have something to do with the ability of the body to repair itself, and because they've lived their entire lives like this, they end up suffering for it in the end. Now, many of us have known people like this over the years because these are the people who got up at 2 or 3 in the morning to go get the papers or do whatever, not because anybody was forcing them to do it, but just because that's when they happened to wake up and they were bored. So understand, while there are people out there like this, the simple fact of the matter is they're quite rare. Now, some people teach themselves to get by on less sleep. For example, President Bill Clinton from the United States is an example of this. He taught himself, I believe, when he was in college, to get by off of 4 hours of sleep a night. The result of which is, as he got older, he needed a quadruple bypass and has had a variety of other unpleasant health problems, and probably won't live that long relative to what he would have had he simply gotten adequate sleep for most of his life. Now, these extra hours he got back in the day allowed him to do a variety of things that he probably wouldn't have been able to do had he been sleeping. So, again, there's a trade-off there at the end of the day. Finally, I'm going to get into one other category of individual that needs very little sleep. This is, not surprisingly, magicians. Now, this does not apply to everybody. However, if you engage in enough energetic-based practice, most people find that the amount of sleep they need goes down a very great deal. This seems to be linked to practices that deal with that vital energy, or what the Chinese systems call the dantian, in the lower guts. People who work with this energy center a lot and pack a lot of energy into it typically need very little sleep. I myself have gone through this pattern a few times where, after several hours a day of this kind of practice, I either don't sleep at all for days on end, or I only need a couple hours of sleep a night. Now, the downside to this is it's generally only beneficial from the standpoint of giving you more time to practice. This isn't the kind of thing where you do 2 hours of energetic practice a day and then you go work like a demon in your carpentry business. It doesn't seem to work like that. So this is a short little talk on how much sleep we need and different things that go into this. Train hard. Hope to see you again, and be well.